Yeah.
All right, here we go. I think I think we're on. I'm just going to make sure it comes up on YouTube. Going to give it a second to boot up. I've
Yeah.
got
You might have seen videos like this.
67 people waiting on my side. Okay,
Yeah.
I think I think we're live. Can everybody hear us? All
Yeah.
right. Well, you know what? Let's
All right.
let's just jump right into this. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. We're here to have a live stream. We didn't really discuss who's going to take the lead here or anything like this because this is going to be a really a casual discussion between me and
Yeah.
Cyrus. We've been connected for a while, but this is the first time we've really had a proper chat with each other. We've never been on a
Yeah.
call with each other or anything like that. So I'm really excited about this. I think
Absolutely.
yeah, what I think maybe we can do is we can just talk about a little bit about our vlogging experience, how we started, why we started, what the journey's been like, what our hopes are, and all this stuff. And I'm sure there's other things that will come up. But basically, this is just a casual chat about whatever comes up and whatever we want to talk about. So, what do you think? Do you think that sounds good?
That sounds good to me. I'm excited, and like Daniel mentioned, Daniel and I have known each other for a bit of time, obviously, and we've I think both fans of each other's work on YouTube. Kind of in this community as well. We've been WeChat friends, send the odd messages back and forth, but yeah, we've never actually had a full chat together. So I'm really excited. And that's why I think the idea for this live stream game said, hey, let's have a proper chat, but let's also talk about some things we're passionate about and kind of share the story with everybody and field some questions as well. So yeah, no kind of
Yeah.
general format or thing, but I think we're going to have some fun today.
I think so too. I guess let's start with when we started. So I mean, I started vlogging, and so this is streaming to both of our channels at the same time. So we'll kind of introduce
Yeah.
when we started and all this kind of stuff. So I started kind of November 2019 was really my first proper vlog that I put out, and it was related to the Hong Kong situation. I was kind of frustrated with how unbalanced the news was,
Yeah.
but that's kind of when I got started. I'm not actually sure when did you start your journey with vlogging?
Yeah, actually similar. November 2019, I think, is when I made my very first video about China. So if you actually go back and look at my old videos on YouTube, some of them are golf related, and so I never actually thought of creating a proper YouTube channel. I thought of, you know what, I'm just going to make some vlogs about golf and just kind of have some fun, just more or less just experiment with it. Anyways, and then things started to switch, and I said, all right, let me try a video on China because I have some interest in that and some knowledge, and yeah, kind of same time frame actually, right around November. But I have to tell a quick story, Daniel. So
Hmm.
one of the main things that caused me, the catalyst to me actually uploading a video on China was me discovering your YouTube channel.
No way.
So yeah, seriously, and I haven't, and I actually wanted to wait to tell you that until we were on a live stream and actually had a proper chat because the thing about it was I remember my daughter is born in Hong Kong and my wife and I were married in Hong Kong. We used to live there. It's the last place that we were at before we moved back to Canada. And so it's really interesting is that I was, obviously very passionate about what's going on in Hong Kong with the protests. And I came across your video and I'm like, man, this guy knows his stuff. Like he is very knowledgeable about the situation. And I'm really glad that, someone is speaking out and offering a little bit of a different perspective about this. And I kind of thought to myself, I'm like, I'm kind of making these fun golf videos, but I think I'm missing the bigger picture here. Like I used to live in China for 10 years. I speak the language. I mean, it's a big passion of mine. I don't think I'm really doing what I should be doing. I think I should switch channels and kind of focus and let me just make some videos on China. But you're one of the main reasons that I was inspired, Daniel.
That is amazing. I mean, I'm really touched to hear that because you're obviously in your zone doing this stuff. The stuff that you put out is amazing. You get really analytical. You really examine a topic from the bottom to the top, and to find out that I had even a little bit to play in that, that's just amazing. I'm blown away.
Yeah, man.
But I think it's like. And I'm glad. I really hope that more people do this because the conversation really is so imbalanced, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit later when we're talking about why we're doing what we're doing because
Yeah.
it comes with some fears about where is this going because it's really escalating pretty quickly. The first thing in Hong Kong obviously was. I'm a Hong Kong ID card holder also, and
Yeah.
I spent time there, and a lot of my friends there, they'd be very careful about talking about things. And it wasn't because of the reason people thought. They thought, oh yeah, you're scared because, the government or whatever. Like, no, they're scared because they're afraid the rioters will hear that they're unsupportive of them. And they saw what they were doing to people's shops. They were burning down the opponent's political offices. Like, people were getting attacked. And my friends would never speak up. If I was in Hong Kong, I would have never, if I was still living in Hong Kong, no way. With a family, I would have not done it. And so for these people who, when I got little kind of tidbits of information and what I knew what was going on in the ground also, I said, I got to do it. I'm in a position where I can. I'm safe on the Shenzhen side. These people can't, touch me here. And when I started making videos, then more of my old friends, my son's classmates' parents reached out to me saying, thank you for making these videos. We can't say this. And then they were even asking me, like, I'm talking born and raised Hong Kongers who, their parents were born in Hong Kong, they were born in Hong Kong. Then they started saying, can you guide me on international schools in Shenzhen? What are they like? And they were thinking of leaving Hong Kong because of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit better now.
It's better now, and I think that's the other side of the story that's really interesting, because I think in Western media, and it's interesting because now that I'm here in Canada, and it's interesting to see people's perspective here in North America. For example, I was talking to somebody today about Hong Kong, and he's just like, I just feel so bad for these people of Hong Kong. They have this new national security law. I mean, it's obviously all of people in Hong Kong are against that. And I'm like, no, it's actually, that's a wrong statement. There's many people in Hong Kong that are very supportive of that. And I'm not going to lie, there's obviously people that are against it as well, but it's not this one-sided thing. And that's kind of what in Western culture and Western media, people are thinking that, these people in Hong Kong are oppressed. They have, all their freedoms are being taken away, and, all of them are desperate. They're just, they need America's help. And that's like, no, a lot of people actually want a closer relationship with China because they realize how economically dependent Hong Kong is on China. And so it's like, Hong Kong's not going to separate from China. The future of Hong Kong depends on a good relationship with China. A lot of people understand that, and they want to have that close relationship. And so so that's why me also being here saying, hey, I want to help people understand, people on this side of the pond also understand, more about the situation.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, the Hong Kong situation for a lot of people might be old news. Like, I've heard some people once in a while, I think I got one or two comments, like, why are you still talking about Hong Kong? Because it was a really valuable lesson. For me, it was such an eye-opening experience. A lot of, it's already known that, the NED and all of these kind of NGOs were involved in Hong Kong. They've openly admitted it. It's on the books of some of the universities. I mean, you saw, Joshua Wong working with the Oslo Freedom Forum and stuff like that. There's no question about it that there's foreign interference, and there was a huge xenophobic component in Hong Kong as well, an anti-mainlander component where mainlanders were targeted and beaten up and stuff like that. Now, there was always some tensions between those two groups with the dynamics of how things, after the handover and just, your entire identity is almost changing. I would imagine it's a difficult thing to process, but what I was seeing, like, it seemed like the discontent or the tensions between Hong Kongers and mainlanders were really exploited. And I thought, when that was going on, I thought back to my mother's country. So my mother's country is Guyana in South America. And when their first elected prime minister, Chetty Jagan, was a little bit too friendly with the Soviet Union, and these are all declassified documents, the CIA and the MI5 went in and they created a racial war between the blacks and the browns, basically the people of African descent and Indian descent. And it really blew up. People were killing each other and everything like that. Then they used it as an excuse to suspend parliament and then replace him with somebody who was a little bit less, Marxist-Leninist leaning. They didn't want another Cuba in the region, right? And so when I heard about those stories, I always thought, how would that operation have taken place? How would it have unfolded? And so when this Hong Kong situation was happening, I felt like I'm seeing this before my eyes. Now I'm seeing firsthand how something like this works. Jimmy Lai, who's always shown, you see him with John Bolton and all of these kinds of U.S. figures. It's his magazine that we're putting out xenophobic contents, calling, mainlanders locusts and stuff like that. It's like, it looks like they've just dusted off their old divide and conquer playbook. So from that point, it was really fascinating for me, and also an important story to remember, because they're going to do this again. They're going to do this again elsewhere, and we need to be alert for this kind of thing. Yeah.
No, it's tough, and it's interesting. Also, as an American myself, and one of the things that whenever I got into an argument with somebody, and they're talking to me, like, Cyrus, you're American. You need to realize that it is China versus the U.S. This is a battle. You need to be on the right side. And I said, well, honestly, Hong Kong is China's affairs. I mean, Hong Kong is a city in China. Obviously, it has special status, but you can't just we cannot just go into another country and start influencing. And again, you talk about these agencies and the amount of protesters that were involved in these. I mean, it's just so much outside interference, into these internal domestic affairs. And the funny thing is, on the Human Freedom Index, right? Hong Kong's ranked number 3 in the world, and you're asking number 17 in the world, America, to come and liberate you. And again, I always say, and I get it. Like many people pre-1997, I mean, here in Vancouver, there's a huge immigration, right, from Hong Kong in the early 90s as everyone was getting ready for that 1997 handover. And I always say, well, after that handover, how did Hong Kong continue? I mean, here we are, 20 plus years later, and again, Hong Kong was able to get to number 3 on the Human Freedom Index under Chinese rule, right? It was 20 plus years of Chinese rule, and they're still on that Freedom Index. They're still, it's still a great place. I mean, it's a great city, everything's, really so many great things about Hong Kong. I mean, even the thing with Article 23, that wasn't implemented simply because mainland China for 23 years never implemented it. It was like, it's on you guys to do it. We're waiting for you to do it. Obviously, at some point, they had to step in and go ahead and implement the law. But the reason why it took so long to pass is because mainland China saying, well, this is your government. You guys have the freedom to do that. Like, eventually you need to pass it.
Yeah, once terrorism gets to that level, I mean, you had Baguio Liang, the leader of the National Front Party or whatever it was called. I mean, he was on a live stream with Guo Wengwei from New York, and he was saying to this guy on the street in Hong Kong while he was live streaming from the protest, saying, we're going to give you all the support you need. Steve Bannon will give you the support you need. The U.S. government will give you the support you need. 2 weeks later, he was arrested in connection for one of the largest explosive hauls ever in Hong Kong's history. I mean, when you get to that level, it's like, okay, guys, the national security law is coming in. And it's kind of interesting.
Absolutely.
The national security law is in the basic law, and it's something that's supposed to be implemented. Nobody wants to talk about that, but they want to talk about universal suffrage. They want to talk about universal suffrage, which is in the basic law, but not talk about that. And the universal suffrage says, the way that the basic law says, it will be implemented in relation to the circumstances on the ground, what's going on. Hong Kong is far too divided. There's way too much stuff going on to just jump right into it. So, of course, back in, 2016, 2017, they had a way to ease into it. They said, well, first we'll choose some pre-screened candidates, 3 or 4 candidates that you choose from. I thought that was a good step to go in. When Hong Kong is such a target for foreign interference, this is extremely important. Now, there's something that happened that's also interesting that you can tie into and think about this. The Democrats want to impeach Trump. And the reason they want to impeach Trump, even though it seems like a useless thing, he's out of office, so, as one of them has said many times over and over again, is that they want to prevent him from being able to run again. Well, what does that mean? That means that they're afraid that the people might vote for him again. Well, what does that mean? That means they don't trust their own people. They think they might make the wrong decision, and choosing this guy might be bad for national security, for unity, for everything like that when the country is so divided. So isn't that kind of an endorsement for Hong Kong when you consider that the situation in Hong Kong was far worse, and it's a massive target of the world's biggest superpower trying to interfere? I mean, it makes logical sense that would be a good first step.
It's a great perspective. It's a great perspective, Daniel. And I mean, it's just really hard to see, I don't know. I mean, even as an American, I just look at my own home country and I just see, for example, like for the last 4 years, our motto has always been, let's make America great again. And I just see, U.S. senators flying out to Hong Kong. And I'm just like, hey, why don't we focus on the problems that we have in our own country, But I mean, I just saw the ulterior motive there, right? That they're using Hong Kong as a way to weaken mainland China. And I think the best thing that I saw was you saw like Ted Cruz, right? Coming in, flying to Hong Kong, telling the protesters, I will be here. The United States will always have your back. We're going to protect you. 12 months later, it's like, well, we're not going to accept anybody from Hong Kong because they potentially could be a spy from Beijing. And it's like, hey, what about what happened, Ted? Don't you have our back? Like I thought you got our back, Ted. Wait, okay, it's not working out, is it? So,
it's a lesson.
It was never about democracy. Let's just be honest. It's not about giving people, Hong Kong people democracy. That's had nothing to do with it.
No. I mean, the U.S. government, they go around and they'll overthrow democratically elected leaders and install literal dictators if it suits the interests of the American empire. But that's the thing. Also, you know what? For ordinary Americans, I would almost understand more. I wouldn't use this mindset, but I would understand more if America, being the number one global superpower, brought some sort of benefits to the average American's life. I would understand why an American would say, no, we have to stay on top. But the global imperialism that they implement around the world is only benefiting the top 1%. You know, they're benefiting their multinational corporations, while the average person doesn't have health care. When, you know, in Mexico, they're passing this stuff. In Canada, you have healthcare. Like, they're not taking care of their own people, but yet the people are still cheering for America to continue what they're doing. And this is a complete distraction from, you know, always finding an external enemy to focus on and not actually doing anything at home. And, you know, Adam Curtis says in one of his documentaries that, you know, Western politicians now are not people. They no longer deliver the dreams of its people. They protect you from nightmares. And when you look at what's going on, they first have to manufacture those nightmares to protect you from. I mean, this is what they're doing to hold on to power now. It's just it's hard to wrap my mind around it. And it goes to show you the power of propaganda, that the average suffering American will still cheer for what the U.S. is doing overseas. Obviously, most people are anti-war now, but, you know, they found a different way to push these aggressions or say, we really need to care about the people over here in China or over in Hong Kong. They're like, yeah, of course we do. It's like, no. How about you first say, well, what about us?
Absolutely. And I think Americans should be saying that, you know, I mean, because, you know, we spend a tremendous amount of money, you know, giving aid to different countries around the world. And, you know, and I do want to give America some grace in the sense that I always say this, you know, it is very difficult for America because in many ways, you know, we are the world police, or we are the like everyone always looks to America. It's interesting. Like, for instance, I always say Canada is in a nice space because, you know, it's obviously size-wise, it's a huge country. Population, it's very small, 1/10 the size of America. So, you know, Canada has the option to kind of say, hey, you know what, we're going to be neutral. We're going to just kind of lay low. You know, America, we just can't do that on a lot of times. You know, we really have that responsibility for the world. So it is a tough position, you know, and I understand. But I think for Americans, you know, like the big thing for me is the socialized medicine, right? Having healthcare in America is just incredible. I have a close friend of mine that just had a knee surgery in America. She just got the bill. It was $91,000, and her insurance has been able to pick up $14,000. So, you know, she's looking at a $76,000 bill, and she's like, she just posted on Facebook, like, what do I do? Like, can I start fighting this? And she shows the bill, and it's pharmacy, $13,500. I'm like, how long were you in the hospital for? 3 nights. How much drugs did you take that cost $13,000? You know, anyways, it's quite interesting to see the chat because everyone's just like, oh, don't worry, like you can definitely fight that. Just go down there and claim that you don't have enough income. They'll be able to at least take 20% off. Oh no, I had a similar bill. You know, I was able to get mine reduced by 40%. And I'm like, how much money are we making off of these bills that they're just so extravagant that, you know, that, I mean, where people are like, oh yeah, you got a bill, no problem. You know, do that. And then the worst comment is just like, oh, no problem. You know what? The best thing to do is just go ahead and refinance your house and you can get a second mortgage. And, you know, I had to do that for a thing that I got because that's what a lot of us do. You just get another second mortgage, you know, that'll take care of that bill for you. And it's like, come on, this is like, that's where I really feel for America. Like we have to, it depends on our citizens. You know, we have to demand more from our government. You know, we're not doing a good job, you know, for the average American.
Right.
I got a super chat that came in. I just want to address that. This was Trevor Norman. The Yanks are always interfering in other countries. They should remember the UK is not the 51st state. I agree. I think like I just mentioned, this whole thing is, you know, the US, I would love to see us focusing more internally. Like, let's try to make our country better. You know, I'm an American. I'm a proud American. It just hurts me to just see my home country. It's so different. I've been abroad for 14 years now. So it's very hard for me to look back at America and just see this country that is very different from what I grew up in. But it's not going to stop me from loving it and hoping that we can turn this around.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of a conversation I had yesterday also with a really cool guy. He's an ex SEC lawyer who's now private in the private industry. And we were talking about that. Like, what is it going to take? Like, what is it that's going to change? I mean, I think for the first thing for sure is not focusing on these external wars and all of these things. I mean, there's a lot of hands in those pots that make a lot of money from those. But
Big
I mean,
time.
if enough people demanded that they stop doing that, they're going to have no choice but to focus on domestic issues and fix the problems at home. That seems like a big first step, but it's disappointing when you see even the most progressive liberals like AOC and everything like that supporting
Yeah.
regime change
Yeah.
initiatives around the world, and it's like, where is there any hope? Like, what is it gonna be? How is it gonna change?
It's hard to say, I mean, it's hard to say when you realize how much money's involved, and there's a quote in the Bible, the love of money is the root of all evil. And, you look at, you look at the pharmaceutical industry in the US. I mean, it's just absurd how expensive things are. And I mean, I always say, like, the United States is a great place to live if you've got money. If you have enough money that you can pay for great healthcare insurance and you can pay for your things, like, it's a great place to be. But, you don't want to be in a position in America where you don't have health insurance. I mean, it's a dangerous spot. And I know so many family friends that have just been severely affected by that. Medical debt is huge in America. And it's just hard to imagine that as, being the world superpower, the number one country in the world. We have to demand better. So I hope so. I hope that we can get more people, more citizens in America rallying around and trying to change the narrative and forcing our politicians to say, hey, we need to start prioritizing that. But
Yeah,
on the flip side,
go ahead.
what's interesting is I talk to my American friends, here in Canada, and they're very much against that because America is it is the most capitalist country in the world. In the capitalist country, the rich get richer and the poor get poor. And so, I mean, I know many people that have done well in America and that say, hey, I don't want to pay for the other people. I don't want socialized medicine. Why do I have to pay for you? I can afford great healthcare, and I like this system as well. So it's not that easy as well. I mean, this is another side of the story.
This is actually, that's related to my latest tweet. I retweeted somebody who said something really well. I'm going to read it to you now. It says, if a monkey hoarded more bananas than it could eat while most of the other monkeys starved, scientists would study that monkey to figure out what the heck was wrong with it. When humans do it, we put them on the cover of Forbes.
Yeah. It's true. In America, it's all about the Benjamins, right? It's all about the money, and a lot of things that you always have to trace back.
It's scary. It's scary how much money is involved, and it's. I mean, the very thing that the people need the politicians to fight against are the same things that are funding those politicians to begin with. The amount of money that's involved in politics there. When you look at how many millions of dollars on average is required to win a Senate seat, it's like these people are expecting a return on their investment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I got a super chat here from Mubi. That's your new channel name. I gotta learn how to say it. What's your position on Maduro and Americans? Do you follow much about the situation with Maduro and
down in Venezuela, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I know that Venezuela had a democratic election, and essentially the United States did not like the outcome, and so they've decided they have not recognized the correct winner, correct? Is that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know enough about it, but I know that there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. I mean, the guy who I had on yesterday, the ex SEC lawyer, he was saying that this should have been front page news, but it wasn't. Was that when they didn't recognize him, they basically handed over all of the U.S. assets to the guy that they did want in power.
Right.
Like they just, and that's the power of the weaponized U.S. dollar. They can basically overthrow governments with the U.S. dollar as well. I think that's one of the things they're worried about losing with China's rise. Also, is U.S. dollar hegemony. But they've created such a huge incentive to push people towards an alternative. I mean, that's a key part of the Meng Wanzhou case as well, is how the U.S. dollar was weaponized and the transaction happened through U.S. dollars. Never mind that it's the U.S. who walked away from the JCPOA deal with Iran, the nuclear agreement to begin with. They broke that deal to begin with.
Correct.
And then they go, it's just... if there is an alternative that comes up, maybe it's the digital renminbi or something like that,
Yeah.
which could be very likely when you look at all of the global federal banks and how much money they've printed over the past year.
Yeah.
The most conservative has been China. I think it was 0.6 trillion, where you're looking at like 8 trillion or something like that for the other banks. Permissionless blockchain currency that can be sent to anybody without any intermediary. It's not going through the SWIFT system. I mean, that could be a game changer, but it would have been America that pushed everybody towards that faster, sooner rather than later.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's something that's it's quite interesting. I had sent out a tweet the other day because someone had challenged me on YouTube, and it's quite interesting because I get this sometimes as an American where people have this mentality of, we need to go out and crush China. Like this is our mentality. We got to crush China. And I simply tweeted back or responded on YouTube. I just said, while we are sending out $1,200 paper checks in the mail in America, China's launching a digital currency. They're so far ahead in so many different ways. And I think that, we really need to look at a partnership with China, because I think what happened is if you go back and study the United States and China history, there's a great book that I recommend called The China Mirage. And I'm trying to get the author to come on to my show because it's just amazing how much of the United States history, I mean, essentially, long story short, FDR and our United States government, we had this entire mirage about China that we just thought it was, we thought China was going to be the next colonized, Christianized nation. It was going to be the closest asset. When FDR met with Winston Churchill, he said, we have China on our side. And Churchill's looking at him saying, well, why didn't you say us first? Like we're not number 2 on that list. And he's like, China's got our back, and meanwhile, I mean, they have no clue of what's going on. And I feel there's a second China mirage that's coming because, again, like we have people here saying, Cyrus, we need to crush China right now. And I'm like, honestly, we can't even really crush the coronavirus right now. I mean, we're struggling so much with COVID. And meanwhile, China, life has been back to normal. And it's like, no, it hasn't. And I'm like, actually, I have a lot of friends and do a lot of business in China. Like last 6 months have been great. And don't get me wrong, there's a few outbreaks that are happening right now. Like there's the tougher restrictions for Chinese New Year at the moment. But wow, they've had a great. There's a reason why their GDP has recovered and they're improving again is because of how they've handled COVID-19. We're not anywhere close to that, in America. So again, like I just think that moving forward, China is a fantastic. They are a competitor. Obviously, you're going to compete on different technologies and stuff, but I think it's also you can also be a partner in many ways, and that's kind of the focus I'd say of my channel, Daniel, is really my passion behind starting this channel and saying, look, kind of a signature line that I always say is, when the United States and China work together, the entire world wins, and that's kind of my dream. That because when I went to China in 2007 for the first time, that's the China that I experienced I was like, wow, it's expanding, it's growing. The United States is here. We're doing business. These two countries, although there are many differences, we're focusing on the similarities and we're prospering together. And we've really gotten far away from that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely right. I've read the China Mirage as well. It's an amazing book. That would be awesome to get him on. But yeah, it's interesting you say there's a new Mirage, but the Mirage is in the other direction, right? Like back then, it was this romanticized version where they thought Chiang Kai-shek was going to bring Christianity to all of China and that China would become more like Americans. And they even had was it the movie The Good Neighbor, where they painted them as this white picket fence, kind of just like us. And they were completely ignoring the revolution that was going on the ground. With the exception of a few journalists who were following Mao around and actually reporting, some of whom who lost their passport after for reporting on that. But now it's in the opposite direction. It's an over-villainized, saying we need to crush them. If China stayed down where they believe it should have always belonged, I don't think we would have this conflict. And it doesn't matter. At that point, it doesn't even matter if the things they were saying about China was true. If China really had all of the human rights abuses that they're pretending that China has, and even if it was worse than even what they're saying, as long as China was down there enough, they wouldn't care.
Yeah.
They wouldn't
No,
do
no.
anything. Yeah.
No. I think that's where I think so much of it is there's a shift in power here, right? I mean, we're obviously seeing, I shared an insight from Ray Dalio in one of my videos where he had said, when you look at these powers of these empires being transitioned over time, he says that's essentially what I'm seeing right now. We are seeing the handoff from America to China. And I get it. I'm American. I mean, we're used to being number one. We don't like giving up that spot. And I don't think I also think, what we have to look at it just very simply. I mean, you have a country with 1.4 billion people, 4 times the United States, that's growing and compounding every year, faster and faster. I mean, it's only inevitable that China will, surpass the United States. It just really was a matter of time. And certainly what's interesting is with COVID, I mean, that's just closed that gap tremendously. China has just really, accelerated so fast, being able to recover quickly. This is in relation to, I got a super chat here from Cambios. I'd like to say that PayPal just announced that they are going offline with the QR code. So in this case, we Chinese are almost 10 years ahead than the United States now. Obviously QR payments and things like that have been around, many years. So
Yeah.
that's a good insight there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things happening there. But I mean, it's a pretty. I mean, that's what happens when you focus on your own country, right? And you prioritize. I had a couple guys on who talked about how China directs its focus by prioritizing the right kind of a field. So, for example, in China, being a scientist or a researcher, your salary has now reached or exceeded, I believe he even said, the salary of a banker or an investor. Whereas in the U.S., a researcher or a scientist, when they're finished their degree, if they realize that they can go to Wall Street and make far more than what they could make in their actual field of research and development, they're going to be like, I'm just gonna go there. And maybe potentially they have a short-term goal to say, I'm just going to do it for a year or two, pay off my student debts. But once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, exactly. Takes a lot to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a super chat from Mubi. I'm going to have to learn how to say that properly but yeah. So how about India, China, America? So there's been some interesting things actually that are worth reflecting on. Also, I don't know if you realize there's a huge movement in. A lot of people know about the movement in India. A lot of people don't realize it's the largest general strike ever in the history of Earth. Like, you're talking over 200 million people, a lot of them supporting the Communist Party of India. You're not seeing a lot of those shots of the crowds like holding these flags. But what's interesting is that Twitter actually, at the request of the Indian government, blocked Indians from being able to see the Twitter accounts of those Communist Party people or people who are supporting them. They basically, you can see it outside, but if you're in India, unless you have a VPN, you're not going to be able to see it. And what's interesting is during the Urumqi riots, China tried to do the same thing. They said, listen, people are being killed here. They're being sliced up, and we've got a major issue. And they're organizing on, in that case, it was Facebook groups. Can you shut these Facebook groups down? Like, nah, sorry, it doesn't work that way here. So that I found really, really interesting. But beyond that, I'm actually trying to get someone on about that India issue, because there's some big stuff going on there, and it's not being covered. Yeah, I don't know if you've been following it at all. Yeah,
I've been following it briefly a little bit, but I want to touch on the fact that when we look at like Twitter shutting down different things, and I mean, so much has changed in our world of online social media in the last few months. Obviously with Trump, and it was quite amazing. You look at Donald Trump and what happened on January 6th in America, which was just unprecedented and a really low point for America, our democracy, and that the entire country. It was a very difficult situation. But it's also interesting when you look at it just from a very technical standpoint. For example, did Donald Trump in fact violate all of these social media networks terms and conditions? For example, like he was blocked on Shopify. So did he do something that would block him off of Shopify and YouTube and Instagram and all of these? I mean, it really was like, you could make the point that, okay, maybe he sent out a tweet that was controversial that incited a riot. And then, okay, maybe that justifies him being blocked on Twitter. But it really was one domino fell and they all fell. And then here he is, the president of the United States, completely silent, within 24 to 48 hours. And so it's quite amazing. It's also very difficult, when we're talking about this, this freedom of speech. I mean, and when you get down to the technical, definition of that in America, even the thing with, GameStop, which you also talked about. I mean, how can you have, basically, how could you say Americans, you are now only allowed to buy 1 or 2 shares of this company because the stock has gotten too crazy, and you know what? Billionaire hedge fund managers are losing too much money. We just have to stop this. But today we're going to increase it. You can now go from 2 to 3 shares. That's not a free market. I mean, this is really some crazy stuff that's happening right now.
Yeah, the price is really coming down now. There's a lot of retail investors who lost on that because the price is being bled down so that these hedge funds can buy back out of they can exit their shorts. But no, it really is crazy. I mean, the things like this really expose how rigged the system is against the average person. And it goes back to what I said. If America actually was a utopia for its people, if it really was providing for all of its people, I can understand a little bit more why they're like, okay, yeah, you know what? I know what we're doing overseas is not great, but it's keeping our position in this world, which is very beneficial to me personally. But it's not. Yeah. It's not even that. It's a
great point. It's a great point because Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the amount of brainwashing involved to have somebody cheer for their system and say, yeah, we need to spread our system overseas as well. That isn't even serving our own purposes. The fact that somebody can honestly believe that and say Hong Kong should have our system, Hong Kong should have a democratic system like ours, even though it's not doing anything for us. And of course, the U.S. is perhaps an extreme example of how a democracy can go wrong. But they're the ones who are wanting to spread their ideology. So I think it is a valid comparison point saying, okay, well, you guys are saying you have the moral authority, to do this. So let's compare here.
Yeah. Got to address a super chat from Neon 1300. Just send a nice little sticker for support. So appreciate the support to the chat. No, it's really difficult because, being an American in Canada as well is actually a very interesting cultural experience for me because, I'm born and raised in Florida, and I spent my first 23 years living in Florida. My first job after university was to go to Shanghai, China, and that's where I began my career. And my roommate at the time was from Canada. And so that was actually, I had never traveled to Canada in my life. I had gone to China before I went to Canada, even though I, grew up in Florida, relatively close, certainly closer than China. But anyways, I always remember what, our first few years while we were working, Chinese people would be like, oh, American, Canadian, oh, $1, right? Like, oh, it's the same thing. And my Canadian friend was like, no, actually quite a big difference. And me having never been to Canada, I couldn't really comment. But I'm like, yeah, of course, I'm sure there's some difference. I don't know what it is.
I think you mean, oh, no, eh? No. We're not the same, eh?
Yeah. But my point with bringing up this story is I always say, what would be interesting? If you took American democracy and you brought that over the border to Canada, where culturally it's probably the closest country in the world that you'll be able to find to America. I mean, culturally, like we enjoy the same things, a lot of viewpoints the same. You could not bring American democracy to Canada. It wouldn't work because the cultures are different. So it kind of just blows my mind when you're like, okay, if we can't bring it to Canada, what makes you think we could drag it all the way to the Middle East or to Asia, where there's completely different values and completely different systems? That is a square peg in a round hole. I mean, that's just not going to work at all.
Well, yeah. Even democracy in the general sense of the word, at least according to how Westerners usually perceive what democracy means. A vote for everybody and everything like that. I can tell you that. And this is coming from Chinese people. These are coming from scholars in the region and stuff like that. If China had a system like that, you had two political parties that were competing on that kind of a level, it would focus on dividing people into groups. It would focus on divisions. And one of the most easy things to do, because China and Chinese people, they're a very proud country, proud people, they would capitalize on that, and they would really try to feed into into the nationalistic parts of society that are in there, their pride, or saying, eventually that we need to get revenge for this that was done to us. Like, they could really pump people up in such a way that China would become such a nationalistic country that it would actually be dangerous, not only for itself, but for everybody else. And this is what Chinese people are saying themselves. There's a very careful system where, people, obviously people refer to it as a meritocracy, working your way down from the bottom up. You've got to prove yourself on these different levels. And the thing is, it's working. I mean, if you look at how many people have been brought out of poverty, if you look at how the country is developing, it's a system that's working.
Absolutely.
I think in the Middle East also, there's obviously the other issues with highly tribalistic groups and things like that, where things get really messy really quickly as well, if you try to copy and paste a system. But before you go on, I just wanted to say thank you for the guys for the super chats, Ralph, Liming Loney. And I missed the super chat where it was asking if we were talking about the GameStop. We just touched on it a bit, but my last video is a specific episode on that if you were interested in hearing more about that. But
nice.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Daniel. It's a super chat coming in, and it's we can talk about this. Guys, what do you think about China and Russia using vaccine as a foreign policy? UK are blocking the vaccine export to Europe and EU. And EU are planning to get it from China or Russia.
The EU is sorry. The blocking, I didn't get that part.
Yeah. So what do you think about China and Russia using vaccine as a foreign policy? UK is blocking the vaccine export to Europe, and the EU, as a result, is now planning to get it from China or Russia.
Oh, right, yeah. I'm not really following it very closely, but it's really interesting. The only thing I'll say, it's really interesting to see the language that's being used. I interacted with somebody, I can't remember his name right now. He's somebody from Liberia who used to be the finance minister there or something like that. And he's now working for an NGO, a think tank in Washington, D.C. And his language has slowly changed, where they refer to China's vaccine efforts to provide vaccines to other countries as vaccine diplomacy.
Correct.
And so I asked him, I said somebody took an issue with that. And he's like, oh, this is not some sort of a Western invention to just, slander. And I said to him, well, I opened up your NGO's website and you talk about USAID a lot and what they're doing. And I've never seen you once use vaccine diplomacy in relation to what you're doing. And he said, well, usually we use it only on foreign efforts. And I said, so actually, there's a pretty good case you can make here that it is designed as a slander. It is designed to kind of take away from what is being done and prop yourself up. But going into the more details about who's getting vaccines from where, I haven't really been following that too much. I don't know if you have more insight on that.
I haven't either, but what's interesting is similar to what we've seen in Western media. I did read this article where there was quite a negative article about China saying China does not have enough vaccine for its own people. And essentially they had said, they're sending hundreds of millions of vaccines to other countries in Southeast Asia, and so they kind of glossed over that detail. They mentioned it briefly in the article, but essentially they kind of try to portray China like, they can't figure this out themselves. There's not enough people in China are going to get the vaccine. Oh, by the way, they're actually sending a lot to other countries in need as well. But by the way, let's get back to the main point. China is not going to be able to do this for their own people. So it's like, hello, there's a big reason, and why don't we? You can always spin something however you want, and I think that's something that when we talk about China, that is such a hot topic button. I can go on and picking up any topic about China. I can find you 5 really positive articles about it, and I can find you 5 really negative articles about it, right? So, you can spin it however you want, and usually the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think it's important. That's why I think it's really important to get people's perspective of, living on the ground, doing business in China. This is just so vital to really have these insights where, as we know, a lot of people that are, these China experts, a lot of them have very little knowledge about China. And
that's when you say, you gotta use air quotes when you say expert.
Yes, exactly.
The same thing happened with the masks as well, right? They were naming and shaming Chinese people who were buying masks in supermarkets and sending it over to China, and not mentioning one time how many millions and millions of masks were donated by organizations being sent over to the U.S. or all over the world, and ignoring the fact that the U.S. was actually stealing mask shipments from their allies and stealing medical equipment during the, right off of the tarmac in foreign countries. It's like, How can somebody from the U.S. paint the story and name and shame people who were sending masks over to China during the early stages, not having any idea that America would not be capable of controlling it, and then ignore all of the other context? I mean, there were so many people on my channel when I talk about this topic as well. They were saying that the first people were always their friends in China. If they had friends in China, they're contacting them saying, "Are you okay over there? Do you need masks?" Because there was this thing where people were asking, are Chinese people gloating that their system is better and everything like that, and it's finally we're proving our way is better than America? No, on the ground, people are not. They're really concerned. Perhaps it's a point of reflection where they're like, you know what, this has really caused me to reflect on which political systems are good and which are not, which would work here and which wouldn't. And some of these people are Chinese people who idolized the American system, and now they're kind of saying, you know what, I don't think it's right for us. But it's not in a vindictive way. At the same time,
I agree.
They're actually concerned about people in the U.S., and they're reaching out to their or friends there and saying, do you need us to send you anything? Is there anything we can do to help?
Correct. The amount of support that we had from friends, just offering me, we can, it's amazing. I create content on the Chinese TikTok on Douyin, and I had so many DMs from people, during the pandemic. It's like, do you need face masks? We can send to you, like, no problem. Like, I won't even, just send me your address. I'll send it to you. Like, are you sure you have them? And so I always think, the Chinese people are, they're very curious about, America, and, they want, and they really, the average Chinese knows a lot more about America because they're studying English, they're studying, they're interested in that culture. Whereas on the flip side, obviously the average American knows very little about China. And I think, that's also a big reason for this channel and why I started as, like, I want to try to fill that gap. I want people to get a little bit different perspective. Let me answer a couple of super chats. I got Ralph. Thank you so much for the donation as well. Shirley, we got that. I got a couple of guys as well. Kevin Zhang and Chen Guo. They both saying, "Hey, I'm here in Vancouver as well, Cyrus." So awesome, guys. Thank you for joining the chat. So good. Jonathan Wu. According to American standard, freedom of speech only apply in public space, but social media is private space. So owner can do whatever they want, and I do think that's true to an extent. And I kind of always just thought of it as an American. It's just very interesting to me because I feel that we're kind of the leader in freedom of speech in the world. Like, we always say, hey, like, for instance, American politicians will criticize China. In China, you don't have freedom of speech. We have it here, but it's tough when you silence the president like that. And again, I'm not like, let's take away the fact of, is it good or is it bad? Of what he said. It's the fact is, like, if you truly have that freedom of speech, like, what is freedom of speech? What is that definition? It's sometimes it's really hard to define. I had a guy that was, from Germany. This was quite an interesting story. I was in Shanghai. I had a German guy that came up to me and he said, "Cyrus, you're American. I love America. Do you know why? You truly have freedom of speech in America. For example, in America, you could say that you hate Jewish people." And I said, "Okay, I don't know where you're going with this." He's like, "Well, you can't say that in Germany. So that's not freedom of speech." And I said, "Well, then is hate speech freedom of speech?" You can really get into this very deep rabbit hole talking about what is freedom of speech and what are these different things. So I mean, it's different. I mean, and obviously for the record, I definitely do not agree with that. I don't want hatred to anybody. So I certainly didn't agree with this point, saying that that's freedom of speech. I want to be able to say that. I say, no, that's wrong, and you shouldn't be saying that in the first place.
Yeah, it actually extends beyond that as well. If you look at, for a political party, because multiple political parties in China, for a political party, one of the rules is that you need to be in line with the socialist principles of China, and saying, well, so you don't really have freedom of parties and stuff like that. And this guy's a scholar at a university he's in Europe somewhere, and he said, but in Germany, it's illegal to run a communist party. You're not allowed to have a communist party. So isn't it the same? That you have to be strictly capitalist based parties in Germany. Now, I haven't personally verified this. He's a scholar though, so I wouldn't imagine it's wrong. But the definitions of how do you define what is allowed in society and not, free speech and not, and the different ways everybody's systems work. I want to also get to some of these super chats before some of them disappear. Some of them already did. So Grace says hello from Richmond Hill, Ontario, very close to where I'm from. I grew up in Newmarket, very nearby. And there were a few other questions. China needs from Dino. China needs a popular media in the West to counter xenophobic misinformation. What do you think would it take, or is it even possible? This is actually related to a message I got from Fernando, also a super chat. Who, by the way, based in Dongguan, he's the guy who gave me all the advice on setting up my studio, my lighting. So thank you for that. And his question was related about talking about the BBC, the British government blocking the renewal of CCTV's media license in Europe, in England, in the UK, and I think. It's a very difficult thing to do to counter it when this is going on, and it's very concerning, and that's a topic I'm going to get to a little bit later on. You have the BBC that reposted a story 7 times in 24 hours of a first-hand account of human rights abuses in Xinjiang, and this is a lady whose story changed 3 or 4 times. I've been following it since the beginning. The first time it changed, I was like, what's going on? You said you only experienced mental abuse. Now you were sterilized? Okay, and then the third version of the story. Now you've been, you had, I can't even repeat the stuff she says, but it's the ridiculous level stuff that you hear over and over and over again about atrocities happening. It was like babies from incubator level stuff. The thing that was used to the bogus story that was used to excuse the Iraq War. So I'm getting a little bit worried about that, and I'm going to continue on to it. But the thing is when you've got people to a level in a society where you've already conditioned them to not listen, to say, okay, well, this is coming from CCTV. I'm not going to listen to this, and then they go to BBC or CNN, and they think that they really have open and fair media. I mean, it's very hard to compete with that when you have a population that's been conditioned so carefully. I think that's where me and you come in also, is when we do something like this. We're not affiliated with Chinese media. We're not, we're foreigners who lived overseas. We've lived in China, and I think, there's still going to be people who accuse us, and we can get to that in a point. There's been a campaign to discredit a lot of YouTubers. But at the end of the day, I think that's why it's valuable. Also, if I was a Chinese person in China saying the same thing I was saying, I think I would be taken a lot less seriously. It's unfair. It's not right. But I think that's one of the other reasons why it's important for us to say, no, guys, come on. And put things into perspective. We're going through a lot of things that we've learned the lessons of over and over again throughout history, and nobody's learning from it. They're going on to the next one just as ignorant as the last.
I agree. And I think that's an interesting thing, Daniel, because I'm gonna chime in on that. Let me get to a couple super chats. I've got Caliber Wings, who said, Daniel is also the start of the rabbit hole for me into this YouTube community where I met all of you. And that's a good super chat, comment, because what I want to talk about is how I think it's so important. I think the future of media, what we're really seeing is we're going to see these independent journalists and filmmakers and vloggers, everybody. This is going to be, the new thing moving forward. And I think this is why I really say 2020 was the year of the China vlogger. I think all of us, Daniel and myself, along with many other vloggers that talk about China, all of us were able to experience a big rise in, subscriber growth and all of these things and support, because I think many people are just thirsty for a different perspective. And I think that is really important. And I think, for instance, I just looked at how polarized the United States is. You have Fox News, obviously extremely biased, and they're going to pitch that, conservative side. CNN's got the other side. So, you have to realize that whatever you're watching, there is going to be a bit of bias involved. So I think it's good is when you have people that, again, like, what's China really like? Well, let's go to YouTube and let's find people on the ground. One of the best resources that I use for real insights into China is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is so undervalued because I'm connected with thousands of expats that are on the ground in China doing huge business. And that's the difference. We're talking about these digital currencies. We're talking about the online e-commerce, all of these things. I'm connected with some of the greatest minds, many of them foreigners that are in China involved right there. So that's where I get a lot of my information from. And it's kind of hard to argue with people that are on the ground, running this. So, for instance, one of my future shows on Real Talk China is I'm going to bring in a girl that worked for 4 years at Alibaba, and believe she's originally from France. And so she went in as like an intern level. She learned Chinese. She, just learned the whole Alibaba system. She worked there for 4 straight years and has an amazing story. And I want to bring her on the show to explain that. Like, tell me all about Alibaba. I want to learn all about it from your perspective. But that's one of the things that I think that, why we have a passion for what we're doing is because obviously we get a lot of support from, many people around the world I think they're just very happy that over the last 12 months, there has been new voices that are coming out trying to balance the equation. And I think that is going to be an important thing moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the actual authentic people who want to do this, who want to bring the truth to people, they're a little bit ahead of the curve. I think these big media outlets who are basically pushing towing the line of their government or whatever the corporate interests are. They're seeing this happen, and I think that's why you're seeing an increase in attacks. I mean, you were attacked by a journalist or slandered or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, there was that Times article against the Barretts and everything like that. I think what you're going to see, because that's what I really love doing too, is I love finding people that have a different perspective or they just say it like it is. I'll recommend, so for example, from Australia, there's a guy named Friendly Geordies. He's a comedian and he does like this kind of funny stuff, but he's got 500,000 subscribers, which is, that's huge for just focusing on Australian issues. And I feel like you get such a different perspective from him. And he lays it out in not only a comprehensive and educational way, but a funny way as well. Then there's another guy who I'm super surprised has so few subscribers called Richard Medhurst out of the UK. He's a Syrian British who was reporting on the Julian Assange case, who was talking about the oil that's being stolen from Syria right now under kind of the areas that are being occupied by U.S. security forces. And you're getting a side of the story that is just you're not going to get from the mainstream media. I've seen one time where they had an ex-general from the UK on their program on the media on the BBC or Sky News. And he started talking about the Syrian chemical weapon attack, which there was no evidence for it. It was used as an excuse for airstrikes and all this kind of stuff. And then he got into this, when he got into the part where he says, but you know what, we don't really have any evidence for this. And the Sky News host just very suddenly said, okay, I'm sorry, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for coming on. It's like, so exactly. I think, to get back to my original point, I think what we're going to see happen is we're probably going to see a lot of these news agencies that are really working for their governments or the corporate interests, starting to try to infiltrate YouTube in a very similar way that we are and make it look authentic. Beforehand, what they'll do is they'll just attack us, but I think you're going to see more of that, where it's going to get a little bit more, the waters are going to become more and more muddied as they realize this is where people are going for their information. It's going to be a continual battle. It's not going to be over when people realize they can get the real information from vloggers on the ground. That'll be infiltrated also.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that, right? Like you mentioned, I was targeted in an article here, and it was quite interesting, just going through that experience because, I think many people, I made a response video to that on YouTube, and many people were very surprised by that, just saying, wow, it just seems, if you can't make the news, so if you can't write about the news, you just go make the news. And a lot of, and it was just, it was a very creative article. In the sense that you could just paint me again. You can choose how you want to write an article and paint me how you want to paint me. But it's just like, Cyrus, he was retweeted by someone that works for Global Times. Global Times is state media. He's obviously colluding with the Chinese Communist Party. That's like, really, from a retweet? Just that connection that we get all the time. Anytime you're retweeted by anybody, all of a sudden must be being paid, must be colluding, where we know that's not true.
Yeah,
I wonder if a Chinese person gets retweeted by a U.S. politician, are they colluding with the United States government? Would we do the same thing? So
yeah, no, it's the mental gymnastics that's involved for this kind of stuff. It's pretty crazy. And then obviously that was a very vicious kind of because he went one step further because obviously you had the issue where you weren't sure where was okay to film and where was not in certain areas, and so basically he reported you. In order to be able to create a story saying this guy's being investigated. Yes. It's because of him to begin with. And
exactly.
That guy. I mean, I've had interactions with that guy also. I don't want to mention his name, but he was covering the Hong Kong protests and stuff like that, and he got into a back and forth with me on Twitter also. And I said to him, because he said the vast majority of Hong Kongers want, support the Democratic parties, and he was showing the seats, the number of seats won, which was like 80 something percent or something like that.
Right.
And I said, so you think this is what happened? And I said, well, and then I go in, I show him the charts. I'm like, no, 57% of society voted for the Democratic parties. Second of all, the cutoff date for the elections, for the district to council elections, the cutoff date was before a lot of the real violence started. There were a lot of people who wanted to vote to show actually they don't support these guys, what's going on, and they couldn't get in time. There's so many elements, but even without that, even just with the 57%, that's a divided society. That's a very highly divided society.
Big time.
You just get to introduce mob rule democracy in a society where you just get a little bit over 50%, while they're doing the kinds of things that they're doing in the streets, like lighting people on fire, killing an old man with a brick, beating up women in the streets, burning down political offices of your opponents. That is a dangerous situation. You still want to say introduce democracy now in a situation like that. And again, democracy, I'm using that word loosely based on how we perceive how it works in the West. But I think we're going to get a little bit more of that. The Times article was really interesting. Also, they went after the Barretts, and then they were quoting ASPI from Australia for accurate content on China, which is an NGO in Australia which is funded by the military-industrial complex, literally Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and they write these China threat stories. And then afterwards, they also consult the Australian government to sell them military equipment to counter the China threat story that they just finished writing. It's like, so the Times is going to just say, this vlogger who's in China says things that's positive about China, so he must be associated with the Chinese government. But this military-industrial complex funded company that benefits from China bad stories, they're an authority for information on China. It's like, what is going on?
And that's unfortunately what's happened with as far as saying things about China, and this is what's so sad is that, for instance, anything you say positively about China is perceived as being fake news, or any person that's saying something positive is obviously being paid by the communist government. There's just and it's interesting as American, because I almost felt that unless you're anti-China, then you're anti-America. Like the new pro-America stance is we have to, again, going back to that comment I mentioned earlier, we have to crush China. And I said, crushing somebody else is not in the best interest of this. And I have a super chat here from Kevin in the UK. China and the West seem to be at one regarding carbon neutrality targets. How about a global strategy to create great scientific collaboration? I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, and that's one of the things that I've mentioned in several of my other videos is the fact that, the United States now does have a president that believes in, climate change. And I believe that this is going to be, this is great, right? I mean, how is the world going to solve this problem unless you have the number 1 and 2 emitter in the world coming together and working together for the benefit of the world? So again, that's one example, obviously, of China and the United States working together to solve that problem. There's obviously many other things that we can work together to solve as well.
Oh, I mean, imagine what could be accomplished for the entire Earth if these two kind of superpowers work together. With the innovation, ingenuity, the history, the infrastructure of the U.S. and the same thing on the China side with all of the innovation that's going on, the prioritization of science and technology. I mean, it could be so much better, but here we are. It's and I think, unfortunately, it's going to get the fight is going to get even worse under Biden. I think a lot of people think, oh, okay, well now we don't have Trump in. I think all the signs, all the writing is on the wall. When you look at the percentage of his staff that's made up of ex-military industrial complex, you look at the language that they're using, you look at their voting history, it doesn't paint a good picture. And then you have a warship that was just sailed not too long ago through the South China Sea. You had a U.S. military plane flying over near Taiwan, and it's like, what's going on? And this goes back to what worries me also, and it ties into a story I didn't manage to finish telling. I forgot to tie it together, which was, so the BBC's pushing this really remarkably ridiculous story, which is babies from incubator level, like the lie from Iraq.
Yeah.
retweeting it 7 times, like really trying to push it, and at the same time silencing CCTV so that they can't even respond to it. It really feels like to me that, you know, they're preparing for something. The public has been conditioned for so long, and not even necessarily if they really want to create a conflict. Even though a conflict would serve 2 purposes. One, it could potentially set China back a little bit if that's what they think. It might not necessarily play out that way, but it might be an item to unify Americans under, because Americans are really not unified right now. They're all over the place, and maybe something like this, a big event like this, could bring them together and saying, okay, we need to come together as Americans. They need something big to bring people together now.
They do, yeah.
So, yeah, and so if that is it,
Daniel, super chat and related to that. Do you think China should sue BBC? Do you think China should sue BBC now that CCTV has been blocked? The CGTN cannot be broadcasting, or they get their license revoked. Do you think China should sue BBC? Super chat question.
I don't know the legal ins and outs of what you can sue for if you publish fake stories. I'm not sure how it works. If there is a way to do that, then I think definitely they should do that. I mean, this stuff is getting scary. It's getting dangerous. We're getting to a point where even if the intention isn't to start some sort of a conflict, we're getting so close to a point where it's just going to take one small spark. It's just going to take one small wrong move. It could have some, and I hope I'm wrong on that, but I think that for me, that's what drives me also, is that I want to get ahead of it far enough, even if it looks really, really remote. You remember the China Mirage. You read the China Mirage also. The U.S. said there's no way that Japan would ever attack the U.S. It's just something that's not going to happen. Incredible. It happened. I'm not saying that means China would attack the U.S. I don't think it would. If you look at historically what they, how they run foreign policy. But there just could be some unforeseen thing, something happens in the South China Sea or something like that, that just has devastating consequences, not only for China and America, but for the entire world.
And it's interesting because I've talked to some people from Indonesia and Malaysia and other countries surrounding that area, and the feedback that I've gotten is we're not too worried about China being down in the South China Sea. We're more worried about the U.S. military boats that are going through here, because like you said, it all it takes is you have planes flying in and all these things coming in, and you never know, somebody pushes one button, I mean, it could just be a complete catastrophe. So we're all worried about that. And again, this is much more beyond China and the United States. This is the global implications, for sure. Couple super chats real quick. Got Kevin Shu. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. The West is just a combination of 1984 by George Orwell and Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Double speech, double think, new speech, Soma. So some good words there.
I think. Do you have another super chat?
I've got let me get another one from David Chung. UK and US accuse the other side of that which you are guilty. Joseph Goebbels.
Right. Yeah. A lot of projection going on, but I think that's a good segue into talking a little bit more about why we do what we do. I know we covered it a little bit, but it's been an evolution for me, because in the beginning it was. I mean, I could see in advance this anti-China rhetoric is going to affect people. It's going to affect kids who are all of a sudden ashamed to associate with China, and I know that people want to say, "Oh, we hate the Chinese government, not the Chinese people." Like they always say that. Well, it's certainly not playing out that way on the ground when you look at how the rise in attacks, xenophobic attacks on people who look Chinese in the West. So it's not playing out that way, and there needs to be some reflection on that. And then even aside from that, I mean, you look at the Ash Institute from Harvard University, the report showing
that was amazing.
Their independent study, like over 90% of the people in China support their government. That is for anybody who's been to China, especially anybody who's here the last couple of years. It's very easy to see why that number would be absolutely true. They're absolutely serving the needs of the people, and you look at how many people are actually involved in the government and in the party. It is very difficult to separate, even if you wanted to. I mean, that this is part of China, and so when I saw people were disassociating themselves, because I remember seeing when I've always been really interested in identity. I'm mixed race myself, and I remember seeing a presentation. I mentioned this yesterday. or not yesterday, on a couple of streams ago, where there was a guy who got up on stage, an Indian guy. He was born in India but came over to Canada when he was really young, like 5 years old, and he speaks in a Canadian accent. And he was very like, there was something odd. Like he was very proud of his Canadian accent. Like he wanted to emphasize it and say, "Listen, where do I sound like I'm from?" And there's nothing wrong with that itself. But it was kind of like, I was like, okay, what's going on here? And then he was somebody who was very offended at the question of where are you from, when somebody asks where you're from. And he's like, I'm Canadian. That's the end of the discussion. But then halfway through, he revealed something where he said, because India is associated with poverty and strife. And then that's when it clicked. I'm like, okay, this is what it's about. There's something negative being said about India, even though it has nothing to do with himself, and it affects his identity, where he doesn't want to associate with India. So when people are saying stuff like that about China, it does affect them. Now, it's one thing if the things were being said about China were true, but when it's not, so that by itself, maybe it wouldn't push me to say, okay, I'm going to push back on this stuff just because it's affecting people's identity. That's not a good enough reason for me. The reason is that the stuff that's being said is affecting people's identity, and it's also fake. And it's also overrepresented, and it's also, just absolute BS. So that's why I'm like, it makes sense to fight back against it. And I've had people reach out to me to say thank you for debunking this stuff, because I was ashamed 100%. Of, my saying I was Chinese, or I would even pretend I was Japanese or something like that.
Daniel, have a look at this comment. So I made a video yesterday that I put on my channel talking about why my wife and I decided to give our children a Chinese last name. So our children have a double last name. Wong Janssen, which we're both very proud of, and anyways, but take a look at this comment that somebody left. It's very deep. And this is what they said. Good man, please do keep teaching your kids to be proud of all of their heritage. This year, I've been grappling with my internalized racism against Chinese people, and I've discovered how much the Western media and racism contributed to my negative feelings about myself. I actually came across your video because I'm trying to learn more about my own heritage to help me overcome the negative stereotypes that were drilled into me in the United States. Thank you for your videos.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean,
that's really deep. And I mean, I know that we have a lot of support from around the world, from many Chinese people, from many non-Chinese people as well, that have been to China, that are very curious about learning China. I even had a funny comment from somebody said, Cyrus, I went to YouTube to try to find out more information about China because one day it kind of clicked in my mind. I said, every single thing I've read in Western media or the news is negative. And I'm like, it can't possibly quite be that bad. Like, there's something missing here. Like, I better go online and try to find another source. And I found your YouTube channel, and it's like, oh, okay, that makes a little bit more sense now, because the way that it's being portrayed in the media is like China's the worst country in the world. But I'm like, it just doesn't make sense, because every day it's China's rising. It's people are traveling around the world. Like, Chinese people are more living better lives, today than they were at any point in their life. It just didn't make sense to him. It was quite an interesting comment that guy made as well.
Yeah, I mean, I hope more people do that, where they just take a step back and say, hang on a second here. Because it really is getting so ridiculous that if people still are not asking that question, man, I don't know what else it would take. But for the media to understand the role they play in this, I think is really important. I was at my Kiwi friend's bar yesterday. He's from New Zealand, and he was talking about how the transformation of culture in New Zealand, where a lot of the reporters, a lot of the news outlets have come out and they've apologized for how they reported on native issues, and they recognize that even if they didn't outright say something negative, that they contributed to the way that people were thinking about these communities. And so, but that's what's going on right now with China, though, is that they're doing this kind of stuff, and it really has an impact on people. I just hope that they start to become a little bit more objective, or people start waking up in a similar fashion to the comment that you just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple super chats here. Let's get through these. I've got Pacific Flooring sent a little sticker of support in, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Pacific Flooring. And Windy Melly, be careful. Many independent content creators are being demonetized left and right. That's certainly something that we're aware of. I mean, but I think it's also something. that's like a little out of the control, right? I mean, like we've heard some channels being demonetized and things like that, but I don't know, Danny, what's your thoughts on that? Being the risk of being demonetized?
It's really hard to say, because I think from both sides you see some things being demonetized, whether it be pro or anti-China. But there is a line. There is a line that you cross when you get a little bit too close to certain things. You get demonetized. So for example, my video on the Hong Kong protests, where after the Capitol, the invasion on Capitol Hill, I drew some parallels. I said, you know what, just a brief kind of explain the story. I said, imagine if these Capitol rioters, they went to the Chinese embassy to get support. Some of them flew over to Beijing to testify in front of the National People's Congress to try to get help. Chinese politicians, Chinese Communist Party leaders from Beijing flew over to Washington, D.C. to talk to them and meet them in the streets. What do you think would happen? All while they're, and imagine they were way more violent than they actually were, that they were beating up women in the streets, lighting people on fire, doing all this stuff. What would happen? And I said, well, that's exactly what happened in Hong Kong. Joshua Wong flew over to Congress to testify it's called the Summer of Discontent. Senators were flying into Hong Kong to meet with the protesters. They were going to the consulate, the American consulate. And it's like, that video not only got demonetized, YouTube disabled the share button. You cannot, you cannot share that video. The only other video I've seen that on, the only other video
is that a video on your channel?
Yep. And then all of a sudden, the views were going up really. The views were going up really, really, really quickly. It was growing above the trending of my usual videos, and then boom, they shut off the share button. The only other video I've seen that on, which is not, if it's not like explicit violence or anything like that, was a video that was explaining. They showed no violence in the video. There was no blood in it or anything like that, but it was explaining why the CIA is the world's largest terrorist organization. And they put out a very, very comprehensive presentation about what they've done. Not theory, like actual stuff that we know has been done. Declassified documents, all of this stuff. Same thing. The share button got disabled. So I think, there's maybe, if it's just some crazy guy on YouTube saying, I think, with a tinfoil hat on or something like that, I don't think they're going to demonetize them. But I think when you get, I know it's going to sound like a, conspiracy theory. I think when you get too close to certain topics and you kind of, are a little bit too accurate or too articulate, I think there is something that kind of comes down on you, because at the end of the day, these organizations, Google, Amazon, all of these, they have massive contracts from the Department of Defense and all of these kinds of companies. They're doing web hosting services for them. Like, we're talking, multi-million-dollar deals, even bigger than that. So I don't know. I can only theorize on this, but I think there might be something to it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the big takeaway from that is all content creators are, you are under the jurisdiction of the network that you create content on. And we saw that with Donald Trump. I mean, that's the best case scenario, the best example, I should say, that you can really look at that is, Donald Trump was immediately banned from everything, for violating those terms of service. So I got little super chat here from David Chung. Now the UK is out of the EU anti-Europe group and are refocusing to China. Same MPs from European Research Group have set up the Chinese Research Group. Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that we're seeing right now, is that Europe, is certainly wanting to continue to work and partner with China. I was very happy to see Germany, they had said that they're going to look to extend their partnership with Huawei and to open that up and say, look, we're going to do a little bit of security testing, but we're not going to block them. We're just going to say, hey, if you can pass these security tests, then why not have the Huawei network here? Let's work together. And I think that's great, because I think Huawei would definitely be open to, let's go through a security test. Sure, you want to test the security? Let's go for it. But we want to be, we obviously have the technology to help you out. And we all know that it really isn't a security threat, because it's funny how in the UK, right, it's like 2020, they announced all Huawei hardware must be removed by 2027. well, if it's a security threat, why are we taking 7 years to remove all of the hardware? Is it really security threat, or are we just, trying to block Huawei?
Yeah. Well, the biggest ironic thing for me on that is that it was already exposed that in Switzerland, a company Crypto AG. I don't know if you've heard of them. Crypto AG is a company that's basically owned by the CIA. It's one of the largest telecommunications companies that provides us. I believe it's either software or hardware to all of these countries for their telecommunications networks. And we already know that the U.S. government has spied on foreign leaders like Angela Merkel. Like it's the American supplied equipment. It's the non-Chinese equipment that has obviously backdoors that's allowing the American government to spy on leaders in allied countries, like Angela Merkel.
Right.
I don't remember that story before. Like that was revealed that they were like tapping her phones and this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then they're talking about China. I mean, even I don't think they really believe that China has these backdoors. I think they would have been able to find them if they had them. Even Microsoft came out and said, "You can't just say this without any evidence. Like we've looked at this and we don't. Can you point us towards where we're not looking or something like that?" And they're like, "No, just trust us. You'd believe us if you knew what we knew." And it's like, well, that's not how our system's supposed to work. Tell me, why are you saying we can't work with these Chinese companies anymore? Show us where the evidence is. But even if it was true, the point is that they want backdoors in place. They just want the backdoors to be theirs.
Yeah, exactly. The interesting thing is that when they had Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft CEOs, all testifying under Congress, and I believe the question was, has China, stolen anything from your company or something along the lines of that, and everybody had said, here's like Google, Microsoft, Amazon CEOs all testifying under oath. No, we never had any Chinese, stealing anything. Like we have no evidence of that. And then even Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, he gave a great answer. It's just like, well, I do believe it's well documented that the Chinese have stolen stuff. It's like, okay, that's a very great way of answering, because you're under oath, so you can't say, obviously, China didn't do anything to Facebook, so you can't say yes, but you're like, well, I do believe it is. And you're right. He made a true statement. It is well documented, but it doesn't mean that it happened to you or that it even happened, because you're under oath. I mean, obviously, if it did happen to Facebook, that's the perfect time to say it, but you're under oath, right. So you couldn't.
And all of these other major companies have said no, you know, so who is he referring to? Like, I
mean, if you're gonna hack some of those, those are probably the companies in the U.S. that you'd want to hack. Right, I've got a couple super chats here. This is again from Windy Melly. If YouTube existed in 2001, you'd be demonetized for being against the Iraq War. Independent media is important. I agree. Independent media for sure is definitely
very
important.
valuable. Very valuable statement, because when you talk about the people who are coming out with firsthand stories of atrocities and stuff like that. Exactly the same thing. If you were saying that 14-year-old girl, the Kuwaiti girl who got up on stage saying Iraqi soldiers were throwing babies from incubators, if you said, I don't think she's telling the truth, you would be, oh man, you'd be blasted. But in the end, it did turn out to be a lie. And that's a very important parallel to draw and say, remember this. Remember, we have very good reason to be really cautious about these narratives that are being put out.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get another super chat here.
Yeah, quick shout out also to MI.
Oh, go ahead.
Win-win. We got a few other ones here. They're
hitting go for it.
Sideways button. Thank you to everybody for your support, and thanks also for joining in for this conversation and your questions. Yeah, do you have some you want to get to as well?
Yeah, I got a great super chat from Huaxia Doucher. This is, there are 5 days before the Chinese New Year, and I will send a red envelope here in advance and send a sincere blessing to you and your family and your friends. So that was very kind of you. Thank you so much for the little hongbao there. And Daniel, what's your plans for Chinese New Year?
So we have a rule here that if we leave, well, it's a school level rule. If we go out of Shenzhen, we're going to have to, we're going to have to get a COVID test for all the kids when they come back. And so we're trying to figure out, it's not really a big deal. They just go and they do the throat swab, but we're just trying to figure out if we're going to use it as an opportunity to just explore Shenzhen more, because Shenzhen is huge. It's massive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've got an RV, so we can go park somewhere and enjoy a
Nice.
park or trail somewhere. So that's what I'm thinking of doing. How about you? You got? I mean, obviously it's not as big of a deal in Canada, right?
Well, it's big where I'm at because I live in Richmond, which is
Oh,
about
okay.
70%
Yep.
Chinese here. So great little part of of the Greater Vancouver area. And if anybody of you have flown into Vancouver Airport, that's where the airport is in Richmond. I mean, we're going to keep it very casual as well because we do have lockdown restrictions, and essentially you can't meet with anybody outside your immediate family at the moment. So. My wife and I have an unusual Chinese New Year tradition. We actually enjoy hot pot. So we love hot pot. So normally we have a lot of our friends come over, and we love hot pot because you can enjoy that meal for, a very long time and have some drinks and have a nice celebration. We'll do that again, but obviously just our family. So the wife and kids, and just kind of exactly like we did for Christmas, just have a nice quiet little celebration at home. But, our hearts are in China. We certainly wish we could be back. My wife's family's in China right now, so we miss them. We wish we could be back with them, but hopefully we can get through this and start traveling again. I mean, we're very much looking forward to getting back to China when we're able to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. So we've been going on. We did good. This time just flew. We're getting on to an hour and a half here. So,
Yeah.
did you have any thoughts on some wrap up topics or something like that? Perhaps what we have planned going forward for the different channels, what our hopes are, who we hope to reach, the types of messages we want to send.
Yeah, that's a good question. So me moving forward, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on. Last year I started. Earlier this year, I started a kind of a talk show, if you will, called Real Talk China, and.
Mhm.
What it is I really have this idea of I kind of had this idea. How can I actually, help more people understand China? And so what I'm doing is I'm using a lot of my LinkedIn connections, and I'm really I'm going to be bringing in a lot of great business experts that are just really great people that are on the ground in China. So I'm launching, the next one will be on Sunday night. It will be bringing in one of China tech's most respected voices, a guy from the UK named Matthew Brennan. He does a great job analyzing the China tech scene. He wrote a book about TikTok and Douyin, and he just talks about the entire story about that. And so it's really interesting because obviously, this is the first Chinese social media platform that has been a worldwide success. And the founder of that company, Jiang Yiming, he's 37 years old. He's an outstanding mind, incredible entrepreneur. And from day one, they always had the vision. This is a global company. We're not doing a Chinese social media project here. We are doing a worldwide social media company. So it's really much that vision, and it's an incredible story. And I said, okay, this guy's just written a book on it. He's one of the top experts. Let's bring him in and let's talk about these topics. I've got the girl coming in from Alibaba. I've got some other really neat projects. So I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on that show because I think that's a different way of bringing in some valuable content for everybody to enjoy, because we can make as many videos as we can. I think we've done good, and we will continue doing our normal videos, but I want to also bring in some other perspectives as well. So that's kind of what I'm really going to be focusing on.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds really good. I'm going to be doing some more interviews, same kind of a thing. Not only from within China, not only China related. Some of them will have a China topic tie-in, but I found it really interesting. My chat with my friend from Nepal, just getting a perspective from Nepal. Obviously, within a society, you're going to have varying opinions, and these people I reach out to don't necessarily represent their entire country, but being able to at least hear some of the different opinions and get an idea and
For sure.
figure out what's going on around the world. I'm kind of excited to do that. Short term is still going to be really mostly China though, because I think there's, like I said, there's a couple of things I hope to do is for people to see through the how shoddy this anti-China kind of propaganda is, potentially to help people with both an identity issue too that they're going through when they see that they're coming from this country that's being slandered this much. When they're in Western societies, they don't want to be associated with it, but it's based on falsehoods. It's based on things that aren't true. So especially, like I said, I'm mixed race. My kids are even more mixed than me. That's a topic that's near and dear to me. My son told me the other day, that somebody asked him where he was from. He said, you know, 你是哪里人? And
Yeah.
he said, I said, so how did you respond? And he said, well, first I asked him, I said, well, where are you from? And where are you from? And he says, I don't know. He said, well, so how did you reply to him? He says, well, my dad is from Canada, my grandpa's from England, my grandma's from Guyana, my mom is from China. I was born in Hong Kong. Now I'm living in the mainland.
That's amazing.
Like, yeah.
That's awesome. That's so good.
So,
but that's also what I alluded to in my last video as well, because my mother's from Germany and my father's American, my wife's from China, my daughter was born in Hong Kong, so very similar, story. But that's the beauty of our world. Our cultures are coming together and mixing. So it's just very interesting. Whereas, for instance, people that are anti-China or that are really saying like we need to destroy the CCP, we have to destroy, again, like you can't argue with this fact. Harvard University went and did a 13-year study. 90% of Chinese people, support the government. I contrasted that because I saw Donald Trump earlier in the year, let's say 6 months ago. I think some type of, I think it was a poll, the president's poll, and I think he's like 53% approved it, and he's like 53%, fantastic. So many Americans love me, and I'm like, wow, like look at the difference there. I mean, that's 40 percentage points. I mean, if 53% of the people in China, that'd be a horrible number. I mean, that's just that, and you're nowhere near that. It really is that very high number, and you just have to look at what China has been able to do over the last 30 years. How it's lifted the people out of poverty, but just the quality of life. I mean, for everybody. And I think when you go to China, this is one of the things I always say is the optimism that is in people's hearts and their minds. I mean, if you ask a Chinese person, do you think your life will be better 5 years from now than it is today? I think almost all of them would say yes. I mean, they've seen like how's the last 5 years been? I mean, it's almost like you're riding this growth stock and you're just like, yeah, I mean, it's going great. Is it going to keep going? Yeah, I think it's going good. Like the company's doing good. We're compounding, we're growing, we're expanding. We see that. I don't think if you said the same in America, I don't think a lot of people would have that same optimism.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So shedding light on that, there's so many aspects of that also, because when you shed light on that, there's so many levels in the sense of you may create an environment for somebody to be more proud of their mother country, where they're coming from, but maybe also we can get our societies to a point where they're finally willing to say, okay, well, what can we learn from China? Because they're not willing to ask this question right now.
Correct.
They're way too high up on their pedestal there to even begin imagining to ask that question, and it's a pity because they could learn a lot from China. Then the second thing, moving on to one of my other goals, is that I really am concerned about what I'm seeing and the patterns that are developing that happened before other major conflicts. I'm really personally curious also how people are brainwashed so easily, time and time again, even if the same kind of playbook is being used. So I've really taken a dive into history as well to relook at what happened before these events. Like I said, in my mother's country also, how things played out. And I want to bring it into the future here so that we can say, okay, guys, these are the warning signs we need to be looking for. It just so happens that all of those warning signs are flashing bright red right now, but I want to get people to a point where they realize that, to step back and not fall into this potentially disastrous trap. And then also there's another layer to that too, is if we can get, I post a lot of stuff that is very critical of the American government. I really find it extremely deplorable what they do around the world, but America is a country that I love. I've been there, I used to go to New York City every single year. I have a lot of family in Queens, New York, driven all over, the Philadelphia, Ohio, the northern states, all this kind of stuff.
Beautiful.
I've been down to Vegas. It's a beautiful country that could be so much better than it is now if they just weren't stuck in this trap. They are honestly. I've been on both sides, and I can say they are honestly far more brainwashed than the Chinese people are. And people might find that really hard to believe. China understands American system. They understand what's going on over there way more than an American understands what's going on over here. There is censorship in China, and that's a topic I'm going to cover in something, because that's a very deep topic as well. But people know that, okay, this is the framework we're working with. However, in the West, in the U.S., people are so sure of their freedom of speech. They're so sure that they are the land of the free, that they don't realize how much they're being manipulated. They think that
Correct.
they have access to all of the information and they make up their minds on their own. But that's not true. That's not what's happening. And it's not what's happened historically. It's not what's happened now. And I'd like to wake people up to that so that they can improve themselves.
I think it's important because, I always feel if you're consuming United States media, it's very difficult because it's almost like you need to watch CNN and Fox News and realize both of them are not telling the whole truth. There's obviously parts of it that are true. So you have to be a detective. You have to really figure out what is fake news and what's real. And it is a very time consuming and very difficult task, in there. So again, like I always say with China is the fact that, yes, they do censor content. Like, we're not going to come on here and deny that 100% the government controls and censors that content. But usually the content that comes out is very truthful. And, it's very, for the most part, it's not like it's a fake news or something. They are just making.
Let me, the censorship topic, like I said, is a big topic, but I'll just mention a couple of things. The racism that happened in Guyana after those psychological warfare operations went on to divide the country and have, blacks and browns killing each other. If they had censorship mechanisms in the country then to stop these newspapers, stop these things that were going on, the country would be far more unified and far better off now than it was than it is now. In China, China has a target on its back. They have a target on its back. There definitely wants to be a divide and conquer kind of a thing that's going on here. I mean, if America was really, truly being targeted as much as China, they'd be having some serious conversations about what content is allowed in and not as well.
Right.
So there's that element. There's a way more depth to it. That's a very simplified version of it. But the other thing too is if when you look at what happened after the Urumqi riots, there was starting to become an Islamophobia problem here. Like there was people were, it could have blown up into something so much bigger. But the government used its censorship mechanisms to block a lot of that Islamophobia stuff online, and they brought it back down to a point where the country was harmonious. They celebrate weaker culture. They celebrate the Muslims, the Hui Muslims, all this stuff. You compare that to after 9/11. After 9/11, mosques were being burnt down. In Canada also, there was a Sikh man, because he had a turban. He wasn't even Muslim. He was killed in a gas station. I mean, it was a scary time. I wanted to do, before that happened, I had a dream to learn how to fly a Cessna. And I was going to Whitby, I think in Whitby or Oshawa, there's an airport. And after that, I felt too self-conscious as a brown guy to go for flight lessons. I was like, I don't want to be a brown guy rocking up there. Like, I'm going to end up on a no-fly list or something like that. And that was an arbitrary thing that happened too. No-fly list. Like, it was a scary time to be a brown person in North America right after 9/11. You became very self-conscious. They used the mechanisms that they have in China to make sure that that similar thing didn't happen. It didn't mean there weren't little conflicts here and there that continued on, but they've brought it back to a position that, I mean, it would have been so much more worse now if they didn't have that capability. Again, that's a very superficial look at some of the things I think about when I think about censorship in China. It's not necessarily to say whether I agree with it or disagree with it, but there's a far deeper context. It's far more nuanced than people realize when they've got to consider exactly what's going on in the background.
100%. I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of last super chats. Carrie, Reddit has been so anti-China. Are you guys active there? I'm not active on Reddit. I don't use that, although I wish I did. Was on that Wall Street Beats group a couple weeks ago. That would have been great. Winston Chow, thank you for the super chat as well. And Kim Magnuson, who commented, good education. Well, we're very happy to hear that. Those are the super chats for me on my end.
Okay,
I'm very excited.
One more.
Yeah, you go ahead.
One more here too. So, Cyrus and Daniel, do we know Johnny Harris, how the U.S. stole playlist? In-depth detail of how U.S. steals land and his views on journalism as a journalist. I haven't heard of that, but it's something I'll look up. I don't know if you've heard.
I think I know that guy. I believe is a YouTuber, Johnny Harris. I just watched a video like how China became so powerful. I believe is the one. If I've got the right guy, I might be wrong on that, but
yeah. Okay, we'll check it out. We'll check it out for sure.
Check that out. All right, final thought. Our closing statement.
Closing statements. So yeah, I mean, if you guys are on my channel, make sure you head over to Cyrus's channel to follow him. Has a lot of great content. I definitely enjoy what Cyrus puts out. And yeah, stay tuned for more conversations, mostly focusing on China, in and around that discussion. It's something that I hope that that more people have a little bit more of an open mind on. And yeah, that's where I'm going with this. I don't have too much more to say other than that. How about you, Cyrus?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining, and Daniel, thanks again for making time and making this happen today. Between Daniel and I, our families combined, we have 7 children, so it's quite tough to organize all the logistics to get this together. So I'm happy we could make it work. It's been great, and also last thing, I'm actually doing a double live stream. So I've got my next live stream is actually Sunday evening, 9 p.m. China time. I'm teaming up with Reporterfy Media. Similar format that what we're doing is we're going to do a flyover of Shanghai, and we're gonna talk about, because I lived there for 7 years. I know the city quite well. We got some amazing drone footage of Shanghai. I'm going to be telling some cool stories of my time there, and what I've experienced in Shanghai. And so we're going to have some really great drone stuff. And since I can't fly back to China right now, might as well take all of you on a journey with us, and we're going to see some really cool aerial footage. So that's the next live stream. It's on Sunday at 9 p.m. China time. And then I've got, let's just look for some more collaborations with me as well. Want to do these more talk shows. Also, check out Matt from Jayo Nation. I think he's got another video that he's dropping. He sent me a message to give him a little shout out. So happy to do that as well. We're all a good community. But my goal as well is always like, we need to look at how do we work together. I think that is ultimately the United States and China. They are better together, and they're better as partners, and it's better for the entire world. So I think no matter where you are in the world, you have to be rooting for this partnership. That's certainly what I do. And I like what you said, Daniel, as well. My clothing thought's really long. As far as, there's a lot that China can learn from the U.S. There's a lot from the U.S. can learn from China. And I think, we just want to have that more mutual agreement and understanding.
Awesome. Yeah, those are great closing thoughts. And so, yeah, we'll look at doing another topic together eventually. But in the meantime, as I said, go over, follow Cyrus, and look out for his live stream on Sunday. We'll wrap it up here then. And thank you, Mike, for that super chat. Thank you very much. Do you have any other last shout outs that you needed to do?
I do. Just Polar Coffee. Thanks for the great chat from Calgary, Alberta. I love it in Calgary. Went there went there last summer. It was fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for today and joining. And we'll see you in the next live stream soon.
See you next time. Thanks, guys.